Hello guys, welcome back to another video. This is video number 2 on AWS CDK. If you're wondering what CDK is and you haven't watched the first video, you can watch it up here. In this video, I'll go through a practical hands-on tutorial on CDK and show you guys how to deploy a static site to AWS using CDK. Let's get started.
Now to start off with, you will need a couple of prerequisites. So in particular, you will need the AWS CLI, as well as an AWS account and user, a Node.js installation, and the npm AWS CDK package. Now, if you don't already have these prerequisites, I have a blog post where I explain step-by-step how to install them and get them set up correctly. For this video, from this point onwards, I'll just assume that you already have these things installed. Now to check that everything is as it should be, you can just create a new terminal and write cdk -- version like that, and that should give some output like that. Cool. Now to begin, I'll just create a new directory called CDK. I'll cd into that, and here I'll write a command that creates some boilerplate code for us, and then we can later modify this. So cdk init sample app -- language Python, and enter. And that should now start creating some code. It also creates a virtual environment for Python. Now that that's done, I'll just write the command as instructed. Cool. And just also, we need to activate the virtual environment like that. Cool. Now the virtual environment is activated. Now we also need to install some Python dependencies like that. If you go in here into the CDK folder, you'll see that there is a requirements.txt file, and we just need to get these things installed. Now, while that's installing, I'll just go through the code. So if you go into the CDK subdirectory under the CDK directory and look at the CDK, find the CDK stack py file. Now this is the meat, so to speak, of the application. And it defines so you'll see that there's a class called CDK stack, and this defines the stack of our application. So a stack is a logical grouping of AWS resources. So say that you need to make a web application where you have a server, perhaps an EC2 instance, and also you need a database as well as a load balancer. So what you would do is you would have all these individual components defined under the stack. So here you would have a some code that defines the configuration for your server, for your EC2 instance. Down here you would have something that defines the configuration for your database, and so on and so forth for all the different components that you need. Now this defines the meat of the application, but it's not actually the entry point of the whole CDK project. So for that, we need to find the app.py file, which is the entry point of the application. And here you can see that there are some imports. So we just need to import CDK from AWS CDK, as well as we import the stack that I showed you guys earlier. So an application is basically just a higher level of abstraction than the CDK. So you can have multiple CDK stacks under one application. So say that you have one large project where you have two smaller projects, and so what you would have is you would have a CDK stack defined for the smaller projects, and those would be contained inside the application. So essentially, you can have multiple stacks defined here, but you can only have a single app. Cool. Now it looks like pip is done installing. So the next step would be to edit this code and modify it a bit. And I'll show you guys how to deploy a static site using S3 with CDK, and also how to deploy the whole thing. And also we'll look a bit into the AWS console. To start off with, I'll just remove some of these import statements, these three, as well as that. And also all of this can be removed. So what we need essentially is just to import AWS S3 like that. And also S3 deployment. Like that. And what we do here is we just create. So what we want to do is we want to create an S3 bucket and upload some static React files to that. So I'll just say s3.bucket, and scope would be self. ID, you can just give it any ID here. And public reads access, just make that true. Just because we're going to test this, so it's a bit easier. Website index document, we just give it the index.html file like that. So if you were to actually run this code and deploy this, it would create a new empty bucket with this configuration, but it doesn't actually upload anything to the bucket. So for that, we will use the S3 deployment import. Maybe just rename that like that. S3 deployment.bucket deployment. Self. Just call this bucket deployment. Like that. And we need to give it some sources. And this is basically just going to be the path of the folder that we want to upload to the bucket. So front end, a directory up, build. And so this folder is something that I have here, and it's essentially just I just ran the default React command to create the default React project where you have this React logo that spins. And then I also ran npm run build to generate this build folder, and that's the one that we want to upload to S3. So we just give the path there, and also we need to give it the destination bucket. And here I'll just call it my bucket like that. And this is actually, yes, this is something we're referencing, right? So we just create a variable here like that. And that should be it. Cool. This is it. And we don't need to make any changes here. We can maybe rename this and call it my first CDK project. That should allow us to, yeah, maybe it's a bit, should make it easy to find this like that. Now, before we can deploy this stack, we need to run a one-time command called CDK bootstrap. So this is essentially a one-time deployment, and it's a stack that gets deployed to your AWS account, and it allows AWS to later, or it creates some resources that allows AWS to later allow you to provision your own custom stacks. So we just write CDK bootstrap, and this should then start running and create a bunch of resources. You'll see that it's now done deploying. And you can also log into, if you log into your AWS console and you search for Cloudformation up here, you should be able to just click on it and get to this page. And here you can see all the deployed stacks. And if I refresh this, yeah. So you can see that create completed for the CDK toolkit. So what we do next is we write CDK synth. And what this does is, if you've seen my previous video on CDK, it synthesizes or generates this Cloudformation template from this Python file. So the Cloudformation template is essentially a YAML file that's it's at a lower level of abstraction than CDK. And just in a few moments, I'll show you what it looks like. So you can see that it's now done synthesizing. And if you go into the cdk.out directory and into my first CDK project, template.json. So it can either be a JSON or a YAML file. And if you, so this is essentially it. And if you look here, it's just, it's a huge bunch, or a big bunch of code with over 500 lines, right? And this is the same as this code here. right? So this gets converted to this template. And what CDK allows us to do is that it allows us to express sort of the same logic in just way fewer lines of code, so that we don't have to deal with all of this. There are also tons of other benefits of CDK. You can watch my previous video if you haven't watched it, where I go through some more benefits. So now this template, this is called a Cloudformation template, and this is essentially what gets deployed or uploaded to AWS Cloudformation, and it is what allows AWS to spin up the resources that we have to find. So to do that, we just write CDK deploy like that, and that should begin. Now you can also directly write CDK deploy. You don't actually need to synthesize first, so you don't need to write CDK synth before you write CDK deploy. But it's usually you want to, if you want to go through some of the changes that you've made, if you want to see how exactly the changes are reflected and if it's done correctly and all that, sometimes it's beneficial to run synth first, and also it helps to uncover some errors that you might have in your CDK code. So you save some time. Cool. Now once it's done synthesizing, you'll see that there's some texture in the command line, and it just shows some actions and some principles and all this. It just shows some changes that it wants to make to your AWS account, and if you have critical infrastructure. If you have critical infrastructure where you need to make security changes or you need to make some big changes, it's usually it's very, very helpful to just quickly go through this and make sure that you haven't done something stupid, or that you haven't done something that might potentially be dangerous. So it's just like a safety feature that allows you to review the changes before they occur. So I'll just write Y here for yes, and that should now begin deploying. Cool. This is now done deploying, and if you go into Cloudformation, you'll see that it says create completed, and you can click here, and also there are a lot of other tabs that you can look into. But essentially what this has done now is that it has created an S3 bucket and also uploaded the build folder. So if you search for S3 in the console and click enter, you should now be able to see a bucket name with my first CDK project. Click on that. And if you go to properties and scroll all the way down, you should be able to click on the link, and that should load the web page. Cool. Yeah. Now before I end this video, I just want to show you guys also how you destroy a stack. So the cool thing about CDK is that you can just with a single command create a stack, and also with a single command destroy a stack. Now, why is that helpful? That's helpful because when you have big projects with a lot of different resources, right? It's very difficult to keep track of what you have created. So if you didn't use CDK, so the alternative of CDK is that you click around in the console and sort of use the buttons and the text fields there to define your configuration. And it's very, very difficult to keep track of what you have created, especially in very, very big, especially in big projects. So with CDK, you can just with a single command destroy the entire stack, and this just ensures that you don't have any leftovers, so to speak. And it makes our job just so much easier. So CDK destroy, enter, and just write yes. You can see that it's starting to delete the resources, and you can see that it says destroyed. So one thing that I want to show you guys is that the bucket still exists, and if you go back to Cloudformation, you'll see that if you go back to Cloudformation, you'll see that the stack is destroyed, but the S3 bucket is still here. And this is because for some AWS resources, the default policy is that they're not deleted with the stack. And so here you would actually have to manually delete this. And again, this is just for security reasons, and there are ways to so you can sort of write in the code, define in the code that it has to be deleted when the stack is deleted. But it's just like a security measure, just in case that you accidentally delete some important data. Right. And that should be it.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the next video.